We are working through Judges.
Yeah, a little recap here, just in the first part of Judges here, Judges 11:1. Jephthah, now the Gileadite, was a mighty warrior. So just a reminder here, what has happened. We need to set the foundation for chapter 11 because you can't, it would be good actually for us to just take a reading and read through Judges just in one swing. But you can't go into 11 without the foundation of chapter 10 and reminding us that Abimelech now was part of that issue with the Gileadites and all that stuff with Ephraim. And then after him rose Jair, the Gileadite. So now we're focused on Gilead, which is across the Jordan River there. And the people did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and all of Israel. And now remember that they're not just serving one Baal or one Ashtoreth or, both of them, but all kinds of Baals and Ashtoreth. There's plurals there. The gods of Syria and Sidon and Moab and Ammonites and the Philistines. So things have really degraded in a huge way here. And then the Lord said, I will save you no more. They started crying out, and he said, I will save you no more. I want to remind you that is a physical salvation now, okay? He's talking about, I am not going to raise up a leader. I'm not going to send somebody. So when we get into chapter 11 here, we see that just this announcement, this introduction to Japheth. It doesn't say anything about God raising him up. We'll look at his relationship with God as we go. But God is sending a very huge message, I think, to Israel and, of course, us as well.
So God's still got a plan, but as you mentioned, the judges are degrading at this point, and they're really this is really a turning point. From here on, it gets strange. It gets very evil. It gets bizarre. I like John MacArthur's comment here, the era of bizarre things in the end of Judges. And it does. Things just really begin to slide downhill with that statement where God says, I will not.
Right.
I'm not going to save them anymore. I'm not going to do this.
Right. The sin has degraded so bad that now God is not doing some things that he would generally do. And men are doing things that they would not generally do. And worse, of course. And so, huge degradation.
So we got some players here. As you were backing up, we got the Amorites.
Right.
Ammonites.
Yeah,
Ammonites.
Ammonites.
From Ammon, that part of the Jordan. And God's going to give Jephthah victory over them. But then there's going to be some infighting in Israel as well. There's going to be some real jealousy between Ephraim and Gilead here. And there's going to be some slaughter there going too. So things are going to get kind of crazy as we go through here. With Jephthah personally, with Israel and her enemies, with Israel within itself. There's a lot going on.
Now, before we go into this chapter here and then into Samson, okay?
Samson.
We should say something here that I think is really important. When we casually go through the Bible, that's a good thing to do, again, in reading in large sections in certain settings and sittings and go on. But if we just cursory read what's happening, we really are not going to understand it. We're not going to understand that he's not bailed out. He's stepped back here. Okay, he's going to be engaged, but he has stepped back. He's taken his hands off the people. The degradation, seeing the multiple Baals going on here. And then some of the things, the wisdom that Jephthah has or lack thereof. The syncretism, we think, that is going on with him and God, which means he's taken the culture and he's interlinking it with Judaism. And then, of course, same into Samson. So when you're reading these things, study. There's a difference between reading and studying. And it behooves us to study what is going on, because it's going to teach us how God will react to us. It's going to teach us how God will react to the United States. It will teach us how God is going to react to the church in certain times, because remember, he doesn't change. And so these types and these principles go on and on.
All right.
All right?
So we had Jephthah. He's a son of a prostitute. He's an outcast from his brothers.
Yeah.
The Ammonites are making war against Israel, and the people of Gilead are asking Jephthah to come, because he's a mighty warrior, and lead them.
Yeah.
And he does not trust them.
Yeah. Now, I can't help it, so I'm just going to interject it. In chapter 6 of Revelation, when I believe it's the Antichrist rising, the man on the horse is given a crown. It's a Stephanos. It's an earthly crown for running a race. In other words, he won the political race of the day. That's what's happening here. This is not a godly crown, if you will. God did not choose this man. He did not raise him up. The people are lifting this guy up. It's kind of like another Saul. I'm thinking of Saul.
Yeah.
And so like the Antichrist type, that when the people pick them, it's not God's choice. However, here's the key for us. God will use him. And just like he's used, people, recent presidents, even Donald Trump and others, he's going to use Jephthah. Okay? So
All right.
go ahead.
So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Did you not hate me and drive me out of my father's house? Why have you come to me now when you are in distress?" The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "That is why we have turned to you now, that you may go with us and fight against the Ammonites and be our head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." Jephthah said to the elders, "If you bring me home again to fight against the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them over to me, I will be your head." And the elders of Gilead say to Jephthah, "Lord, be a witness between us, if we do not do as you say." He's not really trusting these guys here.
No, he's questioning them.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's going to make them take a vow. Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and leader over them. Jephthah spoke all these words before the Lord at Mizpah. In other words, he's kind of making these guys swear to him before the Lord that they're going to do what they said they would do and make him a leader, since he was an outcast and one of some, what would you call them, thugs?
Right.
Worthless fellows.
Worthless, empty. The word is empty fellows.
Yeah.
He is Jephthah is writing with empty fellows. What does Proverbs say about company? So if he's running with empty fellows, he's probably fairly empty himself spiritually. I guess, again, we talked about his syncretism in Israel. They're calling, they're using the name of the Lord. And I want to remind you that in the Ten Commandments, do not, you shall not use the name of the Lord your God in vain. The word there is to carry it like you would wear it. I'm going to wear it, but I'm going to wear it in vain. And that's what the Israelites are doing right here. They're announcing the Lord. They're using his name, and they have cried out, and the Lord is putting them on a spot again. And so they're just interjecting the Lord's name here again. But right now, he is not fighting for them. So we'll get to this. Yeah,
he is not. He's not trusting them. You go through this, you just get this kind of sense that Jephthah is, there's no direct call from God. There's none of the stuff that you had in some of the earlier judges, and so I was reading some commentaries on him, and he's not one of my favorite characters. But Pastor Raymond pointed out that he's in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11. Somewhere along here.
And so is Lot.
So is Lot.
And so is Samson. Well, first of all, that helps us. It helps me. I don't know about you, but it helps me when I look in the mirror. I go, okay, there might be some hope.
Yeah.
But with the Lord, there's great hope.
There is.
So they do act in faith, and actually, Pastor Joe and I got to talking about this when you brought up Luke chapter 8. That when the word comes, remember the word comes. Faith comes by hearing. And then when they get this sense that God is doing something, then they begin to react. And I think that we should keep that in mind as we go forward. When God gives you an opportunity to interject yourself into somebody else's life, into a situation, to announce his name, I would be very careful. about just doing things out of sentiment. Like this would be good for the community. You know, this would be good for, you know, to show that, you know, maybe I'm a good person. I would honestly suggest that at some point you need to interject the name of Jesus Christ there. Because faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word, not by just saying, you know, I want to do this because I love you. Okay? So keep those things in mind, and the Lord will use those things.
So somewhere in here, Jephthah comes to faith.
Yeah.
And yeah. So he sends messengers to the king of the Ammonites. Now this is fascinating to me. They're going to go back all the way back to the Exodus and talk about what happened when God brought him up out of Egypt. Jephthah is going to point out that that's 300 years ago from the time of this story, 300 years in the past. So it is just interesting how foundational that whole story is. So Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, said, "What do you have against me, that you have come to me to fight against my land?" King of the Ammonites answered the messengers of Jephthah, "Because Israel, on coming up from Egypt, took away my land, from the Arnon to the Jabbok and to the Jordan. Now therefore restore it peaceably." He wasn't there 300 years ago. They took away my land.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Now Jephthah's going to point some things out to him.
Sounds like the Palestinians.
Yeah.
Today.
So Jephthah's going to point some things out to him. So he sends a message. Jephthah again sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites. He said to him, "Thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab or the land of the Ammonites. But when they came up from Egypt, Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea and came to Kadesh. Israel then sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, 'Please let us pass through your land.' But the king of Edom would not listen. And they sent also to the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel remained in Kadesh. Then they journeyed through the wilderness, went around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and arrived on the east side of the land of Moab, and encamped on the other side of the Arnon. But they did not enter the territory of Moab, for the Arnon was the boundary of Moab. Israel sent messengers to Sihon and the Amorites, king of Heshbon. Israel said to him, 'Please let us pass through your land to our country.' But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory. So Sihon gathered all of his people together and encamped at Jahaz and fought with Israel. And the Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. So Israel took possession of all the land of the Amorites who inhabited that country. And they took possession of all the territory of the Amorites from the Arnon to the Jabbok. This is the land they're talking about. And from the wilderness to the Jordan. So then the Lord, the God of Israel, dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel. Are you to take possession of them? Will you not possess what Chemosh, your God, gives you to possess? And all that the Lord our God has promised, has dispossessed before us, we will possess." So he recounts the story. He says, no, it is God who has given us this land. Aren't you satisfied with what your God has given you? Chemosh is in the Bible a detestable God listed. There was a story where Jehoshaphat was going out to fight against Moab, and their god Chemosh, the king there, sacrificed his son on the wall of the city, to their gods. Chemosh was a god of child sacrifice. The reason I bring that up is that this becomes a problem.
Yeah, right.
But Chemosh was a god known as a god of child sacrifice.
Yeah, and I think this could very well be a clue. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, are you better than Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever contend Israel, or did he ever go to war with them? While Israel lived in Heshbon and its villages, and in Auror and its villages, and all the cities that are on the banks of the Arnon, so this is in the Jordan, 300 years, why did you not deliver them within that time? I therefore have not sinned against you, and you do me wrong by making war on me. The Lord, the God, the judge, decide this day between the people of Israel and the people of Ammon. Now, I do want to make a case here. maybe a minor case, because I can't back it up in a big way, except to say this, that before this, the people were talking on behalf of God, and Jephthah keeps saying, "You've come up to war against me." Here he says, "Why did you?" Let's see. Therefore, I therefore have not sinned against you. Why do you wrong by making war on me? So this is very interesting in my view.
Well, he does invoke the Lord here, that the Lord would judge between the people of Israel and the people of Ammon.
He does. He does. He's going to continue to invoke the Lord here, but I just can't help but see the syncretism or the pride, the mighty warrior kind of concept here. He has not been all in with God, and I think he's only kind of half in. So, yeah.
But the king of the Ammonites did not listen to the words of Jephthah that he sent to him. So, the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jephthah. Now we can begin to see God really working. He passed through Gilead and Manasseh and passed on to Mizpah of Gilead. From Mizpah of Gilead he passed on to the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, "If you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the Ammonites, shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering." It's a problem.
It's a big problem.
It's a problem.
You know, you can read commentary after commentary and say, you know, God would not allow this, and just before this, the Spirit of the Lord, it was upon him. But remember the context. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh and on to Mizpah. So he's this mighty warrior has the Spirit of God upon him, and conquering, you know, the enemy. However, when it says burnt offering, there's no place in the Old Testament where you take burnt offering and it means anything but a sacrifice of flesh. Okay? You can't make a case for it. And now here's what's going to happen to our brains, and it happens to all of us, every single one of us, even me. Okay? This is what happens to our brains. This isn't right. God is not into this. He would have jumped in and said something, you know, and all of these kinds of things. But you can't read what's into the text what isn't there. Okay? So as we'll get to the end of the story, and we'll talk about, you know, a couple things, a couple, you know, examples, you know, possibilities. But it does say a burnt offering. Okay? So.
And you have to wonder his intent here.
Yeah.
What comes out of my house, not what is in my barns, not what is the first of my flocks, not what is in my, you know, stalls or any of those things. It's what comes out of my house. Now, for sure, back in those days, sometimes there were, you know, they'd keep some lambs or keep some sheep on the first floor of their house. That wasn't always that unusual, but you just got to wonder what his intent is here. Personally, I'm rather ambiguous as to how this goes, and I think MacArthur kind of has a really good note on this that we'll talk about. Yeah. I think the Bible stresses her celibacy as someone set apart to the Lord, but that whole burnt offering thing is indeed problematic.
It's going to emphasize her perpetual virginity, if you will, not perpetual forever, but her lifelong virginity. And so we'll talk about that as one of the possibilities. But and like you said, you know, it was, in fact, it wasn't just sometimes. In many of the houses, in the lower floor, they would keep the lambs or those animals that were sick, those kind of things. And if you go over to Israel right now, they'll show you those places where in the bottom floor. Then they would build a home on top of it. And remember, if they had children, they would build a room for the son, you know, on top of that, and go up a couple stories there. So that's probably that. Now that's a historical context, but we're going to talk about. Remember this concept here. When you're trying to translate or understand something, begin with the context of the verses, the surrounding verses. then expand to the rest of the book first. Okay? Start with the context, go to the rest of the book, and then go outside that book and try to stay within the Bible here. But remember that the foundation of this story here is that Jephthah is not all in with God. God did not raise him up. God is going to use him despite all that, and there's going to be problems or so.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. There are definitely some problems.
Yeah.
All right, so Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them. The Lord gave them into his hand. He struck them from Aroer to the neighborhood of Minnith, 20 cities, and as far as Abel-keramim, with a great blow. So the Ammonites were subdued before the people of Israel. Then Jephthah came to his home at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. Now this becomes a part of the story, maybe a possibility here too as well.
And by the way, him not having a bunch of kids is a lack of a blessing there as well. So that's kind of, and just an interesting note there. She was the only child. Right.
As soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you have become the cause of great trouble to me. For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow." She said to him, "My father, if you have opened your mouth to the Lord, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has avenged you on your enemies, on the Ammonites." So she said to her father, "Let this thing be done for me. Leave me alone 2 months, that I may go up and down on the mountains and weep for my virginity, I and my companions." Not weep for my death. Here the emphasis is on her virginity. So he said, "Go." Then he sent her away for 2 months. She departed. She and her companions wept for her virginity on the mountains. At the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow that he had made. She had, interesting past tense, had never known a man, and it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went year by year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in the year. So what happened here?
Well, you're going to have to make up your own minds, but
goodness.
we'll just talk through some scripture here, okay? According to his word was a burnt offering. So he did according to his word. You're going to have to make up your minds what that meant. I can only tell you that a burnt offering was exactly that. It was a sacrifice of the flesh. But as Pastor Joe is mentioning, the emphasis here is at the end is on her virginity. So that's why many commentaries would actually like to say, well, she was just she was a lifelong virgin, and she never married, she never had children. That is a big problem in Israel, okay? That's a problem. And so that's, the family's going to mourn over that, okay? However, they're also going to mourn over that if she died and left Jephthah with no other family, okay? So that's kind of a concept is there as well. And then finally, what I would say is, are they meeting every year to dance on the mountains because she didn't have kids?
It could be because his line died out and that was a big deal in Israel.
I think she died, and that they're that's brought grief to Israel, and so they're mourning her passing. That's the concept here, and it just goes with his initial vow. So that's kind of the idea.
I really like MacArthur's note.
MacArthur's
note talks about both of these. Some interpretations reason that Jephthah offered his daughter as a living sacrifice in perpetual virginity with this idea. Verse 31 is made to mean, "We will be the Lord's," or "I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." The view sees only perpetual virginity and rejects offering a human sacrifice as being against God's revealed will. On the other hand, since he was, and I love how MacArthur ticks these off, since he was one, beyond the Jordan, that's a problem. Far from the tabernacle, a hypocrite in religious devotion, familiar with human sacrifice among other nations, influenced by such superstition, and wanting victory badly, he likely meant a burnt offering. The translation in verse 31 is "and," meaning you will be given to the Lord and a burnt offering, not given to the Lord or a burnt offering. His act came in an era of bizarre things.
A couple of other things. He was out for vengeance, okay? And he was running with worthless fellows. So there's some things in his life and the circumstances there that reveal that his mind just wasn't right. And I would go back to the idea here there. If he has one child in the house, he's not really too concerned about one child coming out if there's a bunch of animals or a few animals. So if he's thinking, well, animals come out of the house all the time. And I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but that could very well be a part of the deal. There was only one child he had to worry about, and he didn't take her into mind. Yeah.
We do, at the end of this, have the example of Samuel, who is committed to a lifetime of service in the tabernacle. It does not call him a burnt offering, but he is given up to the Lord. So it could have been something like that. In the prophets, I remember especially in Jeremiah, God hates child sacrifice, and he berates Israel as saying, such a thing never entered my mind. I had never conceived that you would do such a thing in my mind, is what the Bible translates it. And
so reasoning makes us want to say this, he couldn't have meant his daughter. He couldn't have meant to kill her. But the text, to me, and the circumstances, and where this is at, chapter 11, it's getting really deep into sin and digression, tells us otherwise. So you have to make up your own mind.
It is in an era of bizarre things.
Yeah, it's an era of bizarre things.
Era of
right.
bizarre things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Judges 12, the men of Ephraim were called to arms, and they crossed. Now, okay, stop for a second. How many times has Ephraim come up? Several times. There's always that black sheep, right? I guess there's the black sheep tribe. Now, Ephraim comes up in Ezekiel, where Judah and Ephraim will come. They'll be connected back together again. Ephraim was a place of idol worship. It was one of the first places where they sacrificed outside of the temple. They set up a place, a false temple, if you will. So Ephraim is a dark side of Israel. And so that's kind of they keep just showing up here as well. So
Yes, they do.
the men of Ephraim were called to arms, and they crossed to Zaphon and said to Jephthah, so they're going to cause a problem here. Why did you cross over to fight against the Ammonites and did not call us to go with you? We will burn your house over you with fire. And Jephthah said to them, I and my people have great dispute with the Ammonites, and when I called you, you did not save me from their hand. So who's lying? You didn't call us, we called you, you didn't come. And when I saw that you would not save me, I took my life in my hand and crossed over against the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into my hand. Why then have you come up to me this day to fight against me? Then Jephthah gathered all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead struck Ephraim because they said, you are the fugitives of Ephraim, you Gileadites, in the midst of Ephraim and Manasseh. And the Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan against the Ephraimites. And when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, let me go over, the men of Gilead said to him, are you an Ephraimite? When he said no, they said to him, then say Shibboleth. And he said Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it right. Then they seized him and slaughtered him at the ford of Jordan. At that time, 42,000 Ephraimites died. Now, the sheen and the scene is what we would consider, it looks like a W, okay? And it's the S or the sh sound. And they could not say the sh sound. It always came out s. So.
Yeah, and it is interesting, just from a side note, that by this point in Israel, 300 years, the tribes are isolated enough, they're having their own local accents or dialects at this point.
Yeah.
And so there's been this kind of, we look at Israel kind of a fragmented nation at this point,
Yeah.
where the different tribes are all kind of going their own way, doing their own thing.
Serving all kinds of different gods. They're not even serving the same God, whether it's false or not. They're serving all kinds of different gods now.
And we've seen this kind of
Yeah.
internecine jealousy where the one tribe will feel like they're not being, that their power maybe is being, what's the word? Their power is being diminished, and so Israel's in a sorry state at this point.
Very sorry state. Yep. Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then Jephthah Gileadite died and was buried in his city in Gilead. So,
Yeah, 6 years, that's not a long time,
Not a long time.
for these judges. Now, he gets a lot of passage here. He gets a lot of press, and a lot of it's just very contentious and bizarre.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, he makes it into Hebrews chapter
And he
11.
makes it into the Hall of
Yeah.
Faith, yeah.
Another one of those, lunches that when you get up there, you want to eat with Jephthah and find out exactly what's going on.
What
there.
was going on?
Yeah,
man?
and what was that vow exactly, right? You're going to get the answer straight to your face there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So after him, Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters. 30 sons and 30 daughters.
Fistful of dollars.
Yeah. He gave in marriage outside his clan 30 daughters he brought in from outside for his sons, and he judged Israel 7 years. So now we've had this before, where the judge actually becomes more like I would almost call a businessman or a leading man in a sense,
Yeah.
where he obviously has many wives, assuming with that
Yeah.
some wealth, and his sons and daughters are
60 kids.
60 kids. We'll get some of them riding around on donkeys, so that's like you bought them all cars later on.
Yeah, yeah, they're donkeys. They should have a car driving around called the donkey.
They should. Yeah. It should be a pickup.
Yeah, right.
Then Ibzan died and was buried at Bethlehem.
Carry my burden.
There you go. That's right.
After him, Elon the Zebulunite judged Israel, and he judged Israel 10 years. Then Elon the Zebulunite died and was buried at Aijalon in the land of Zebulun. After him, Abdon the son of Hillel, the pirate.
Yes.
The
Pirathonite.
We named him the pirate. The Pirathonite judged Israel. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys, and he judged Israel 8 years. So all these kids, yeah, this is really interesting.
All these kids, yeah.
Then Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, died and was buried at Pirathon in the land of Ephraim, again in the hill country of the Amalekites. The hill
So must
country
be
of
still
the
some Amalekites
The
around.
Amalekites are still around, which is a bad sign. So another summary here, we've had one or two of these, where you have these leaders that show up after somebody who is judged, after Jephthah. Three of them show up. They have a combination of 25 years. And again,
A lot of kids.
Yeah, a lot of kids, a lot of donkeys. What's interesting here is I think it looks again like it's kind of discombobulated, if I can use that word. There's no real continuity here. It's still very synchronistic. I don't think, Jephthah took them and God, helped them before, but it's not coming out real fine here, if you will. So,
All right.
yeah.
Oh, do you want to take the plunge to Samson?
Well, or you can bring up another subject if you want.
Can I?
Yeah, let's talk about something else. Let's get into Samson next week.
So we get into Samson next
I'm going to
week?
put him on the spot here. What do you want to talk about?
Absolutely. So let's talk about this idea of faith and godliness here in the Old Testament, because it is a big issue, right? I firmly believe that salvation is the same through all the ages. The just shall live by faith.
Yeah.
Salvation is by faith in God. I've been working through Psalm 40, and I find it's really interesting. You see this throughout the Psalms in quite a few places. So I'm in Psalm 40, and I'm just going to read verse 6 here. Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but my ears you have opened. That idea, my ears you have opened, means I can understand you. I understand you now. I'm listening to you. I get it, kind of a thing. If you remember, Jesus was saying that he spoke in parables because he didn't want them to understand. People whose ears were plugged and whose eyes were closed and whose hearts were hardened. But here he's saying, my ears you have opened. In other words, I understand now that burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. Then I said, here I am, I have come. It is written about me in the scroll. I desire to do your will, my God. Your law is within my heart. I will proclaim your saving acts in the great assembly. I do not seal my lips, Lord, as you know. This is almost like New Testament gospel here, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not the sacrifices. It's not the sin offerings. So Pastor and I have bantered back and forth a little bit about the idea of the temple in the millennium and the temple, Zechariah's temple, right?
Yeah.
And which doesn't seem to fit anywhere else.
Ezekiel's
Temple, excuse me.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to fit anywhere else. And you know, as I was reading through this, I was thinking, you know, the sacrifices were for the people who had not put their faith, who had not given their hearts to God. It's kind of like Jesus says. I'm not saying that a faithful person wouldn't do the sacrifices, but it seems like those who come to faith come up against us in the Old Testament time and time again.
Yeah.
You don't require sacrifices. You don't want burnt offerings. You want repentance. You want a broken heart, and like David says, and a contrite spirit. All the way through the Bible. So there was a famous preacher not too long ago, got a lot of hot water. He's a good guy. I like his stuff, but I'm trying to figure out, you know, in some of these ages and some of these things, God must have had another way of bringing people to salvation. I'm thinking, no, he's used the same way. All through the ages,
That's right.
all through the time, he's used the same way.
Yeah.
A repentant heart that by, just like David says in his Psalms, by confession comes to a saving knowledge of Jesus.
Yeah. I find it really interesting that when Jesus came, his disciples, remember, again, when you go through the book of Mark, if you just read Mark, there's not one time, you can't find one time where the disciples do something right. They do everything wrong in the book of Mark, everything. And so, but Jesus is bringing them along. So the concept here that where they are going through the fields and they're picking grain and they're doing these things, and Jesus is leading these sheep. Then what do the Pharisees do? The Pharisees jump on Jesus. And then the Pharisees jump on, the disciples at some point. Your master does this, whatever. So the concept here is just kind of like this Jephthah thing, that the Lord comes, we hear his word, we see the opportunity, we go after him, and he begins to lead us in the way, let's say the era of Bazaar.
Era of Bazaar.
The era that we're living in, where you're living, he begins to lead you so that there's abundance of grace on your life. There's an abundance of grace on the church, no matter what is happening. Now, Pastor Joe was talking earlier, in fact, the last two times we've talked about it, he said this, that in Luke chapter 8, the seed was dropped. Remember, the word was dropped.
The sower and the soil.
And by faith it was received by those who had a good heart. By those who had a good heart. So, and then they produced fruit. Okay? They produced a crop. So the concept is this, that the Lord is going to continue, whether we're going, 30%, and this is what Jesus said, 60% or 100%, whether we're 30% in or 50% in or 100% in, the Lord is always calling out with an opportunity and his word for us to intercede, to get engaged, and to produce fruit. So no matter how old, we have an older congregation, no matter how old we are, no matter what situation we find ourselves in, God is doing something, or we would be gone. The church would be gone. So he's pouring out, he's throwing out this seed, and the opportunity is everywhere. And the question really is, are we going to live in Gilead, and we're going to go out for ourselves, or are we going to say, hey, I'm all in, where's the battle? Send me to the front lines, because the time is short.
Yeah, it'd be good to talk a little bit about vows here, because that comes up in the teachings of Christ, and it comes up in the New Testament too. Because as believers, we know that God's in control of the future and we're not. And so Christ comes right out and says that don't swear, don't make these vows, don't evaluate things in heaven, things on earth, because you don't really know what the future is going to bring. And Jephthah is known for this rash vow. I mean, if most believers, if they know their Bible pretty well and you say Jephthah, this comes to mind, right?
Right.
This rash vow, because we don't know how God's going to work things out in the future. Christ warned against it. And it's written in James. Here, just the idea about boasting about tomorrow. James 4:13, now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone there knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. So the idea here mainly seemed to be about making promises you don't know if you're going to be able to keep. But just in general, this idea that if the Lord wills, we're trying to follow the Lord's will and not make commitments that will become a stumbling block to us because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yeah. That's your yes be yes and your no be no.
You don't know what's
Keep
going
it
to come
simple.
out your front door when you come home.
Right. So let's go ahead and pray and close. Lord, we're very grateful, Lord, to have the opportunity to minister together in this place, in this community, with Fellowship Harvest and others who are affiliated with us somehow, Lord God. We're just very, very grateful. So, Lord, as we go out of these doors here, help us to carry your word and carry your name in a way that delights you and that glorifies your holy name. Help us not to be rash. Help us to hold our tongue and then only to glorify you and to help others, Lord God. And we'll worship you and honor you for it. We're very grateful for the sacrifice of your one and only Son. We give you all the praise and the glory for all the fruit that will come from it in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen.